The 1910 ballet, The Firebird, is an amalgamation of several traditional Russian fairy tales about good and evil, and the natural world of humans compared to the supernatural world of magic beings. Created when the then unknown composer Igor Stravinsky was commissioned by Sergei Diaghilev for the Ballet Russe. The story begins, like so many fairy tales before it, with a handsome prince stumbling into a magic land, the garden of an evil sorcerer called Kashai the Immortal. In the garden, he meets the majestic titular Firebird. He captures her, and after a pas de deux or partnered dance, he frees her and accepts a magic feather in return for her freedom. If ever Ivan is in trouble, all he needs to do is raise it in the air, and she will come to his aid. As she flies away, 13 dancing princesses enter the garden, and Ivan, of course, falls madly in love with the 13th princess, Katerina. The princesses warn Ivan of the evil Kashai, a sorcerer who just so happens to enjoy turning traveling princes to stone. But despite this, Ivan still goes to ask Kashai for Katerina's hand in marriage, and finds himself in a sticky situation when Kashai orders all of his scary monster minions to attack. Ivan remembers the magic feather, though, and the Firebird reappears, revealing that Kashai's immortality is dependent on the well-being of his soul, which is kept in a magic egg. The Firebird weaves a spell that forces Kashai and his servants to perform an infernal dance, which grows riotous, which makes everyone so exhausted that they collapse. While the Firebird is lulling everyone to sleep, Ivan smashes the egg, and all is right in the garden again. Evil has been defeated by good. Kashai, the villain, dies. The castle is destroyed. All of the monsters are returned to humans, and Ivan gets the girl. Before I go into the topic I selected, I want to ask, how did you hear a fairy tale like that for the very first time? Maybe at bedtime, a parent told you a story like I just told you. Or maybe you read it in a storybook. Or maybe it was a particularly memorable Disney movie. But when you're told a story, most of the time speech and language is going to be the primary way that you've communicated with others. In a book, or in a play, or even in a song, you can describe who the characters are, and what they feel, and what they do, and the world they live in, and the majority of the time, that's going to be the primary way that your audience is going to gain information. But what if you can't? You might use your hands or draw a picture maybe, thus using visuals to tell the story. When Igor Stravinsky's Firebird premiered as a ballet in 1910, audiences had the benefit of choreography and costumes and acting. But if you're listening to the concert suite without all of that, which has been more common than seeing the performed ballet for some 100 years now, Igor Stravinsky, with nothing more than an orchestra, still manages to tell this universally epic tale of love and magic, of damsels in distress, of evil villains, and of charming princes, clear as day. So how did he do it? When a composer tries to tell a story through music without the use of words, this is unsurprisingly called musical storytelling, but you're also going to hear it called program music or tone painting. To learn how composers accomplish this, first we're going to talk about the story being told, the fairy tale of Ivan the Firebird and Kashai the Immortal. Fairy tales are arguably the easiest stories to tell without words because they're the most universal and basic types of stories to exist, and you're probably already very familiar with them if you recognize anything on the screen. All cultures have some form of folk tales or fairy tales that are passed through generations. But what makes the story of the Firebird seem so familiar? Archetypes, or universal symbols, are types of characters or situations that represent patterns which exist across humanity. This might be a character, or a theme, or a symbol, or even a setting. Archetypes breed familiarity and produce an emotion in the reader. So as listeners and viewers, we understand the relationship dynamics at play before we even see the characters interact. Archetypes are copied because they occupy examples of universal norms. And as audiences, we're familiar with these norms, and thus we know what to expect from stories with a damsel in distress, a battle of good versus evil, humans versus magic beings, star-crossed lovers, or a hero saving the day. Without the use of these archetypes, it takes longer for an audience to create the connection between these characters. So, by using these simple fairy tale archetypes, an audience will immediately know the story. Stravinsky then takes these fairy tale archetypes and assigns leitmotifs to each one, placing lots of orchestral textures to further develop the story and setting. A leitmotif, literally meaning leading motive in German, is a recurring musical theme associated with a particular piece of music about a particular person, place, or idea, emerging as a storytelling device in 19th century opera. Entire books could be written about Stravinsky's rich textures and recurring motifs, so I'm going to focus primarily on the leitmotifs tied to our four archetypal main characters: Ivan, the handsome prince hero; Katerina, the damsel in distress love interest; Firebird, the good magical creature; and Kashai, the bad magical villain. The first 6 notes of the introduction present an ostinato in the cellos and basses, containing 2 of the most prominent leitmotifs in the whole ballet: the leitmotif for the Firebird and the leitmotif for Kashai the Immortal. The 6-note figure you see on the screen is divided into 2 3-note groups, and omitting the last passing notes of these groups, Stravinsky creates a linear statement of a major third followed by a minor third. And in this A-flat, F-flat, D, F progression, Stravinsky has formed the magic thirds, Kashai's leitmotif. Further, if you take this tiny ostinato, it also serves as the intervallic basis for the Firebird's leitmotif. When you take that first 3-note group and the first note of the second to make that A-flat, F-flat, E-flat, D. The music of the supernatural elements in the Firebird uses the octatonic or diminished scale, alternating the intervals between whole and half steps to evoke a sense of mysterious exoticism, which paints the supernatural characters as otherworldly, which is similarly equipped in Stravinsky's Mentor's opera Kashai the Immortal by Rimsky-Korsakov. The humans, on the other hand, are characterized by leitmotifs constructed through the incorporation of Russian folk music and diatonic scales, which creates the Russian feeling that Diaghilev was looking for when he commissioned the ballet in the first place. So here we have our humans, Ivan and Katerina, played with diatonic music, using 7-note scales only of the major key to distinguish them from the supernatural. Stravinsky refers to this distinction between the diatonic and chromatic music as light harmony, or individual harmonic characterization. A perfect fifth represents the simple, pleasant human interactions, while the dissonant tritone is supernatural. That clash between notes is used extensively to distinguish the evil magic of Kashai. It is worth noting that diatonic music does not appear at all in the introduction. In fact, it makes up a pretty small fraction of the music in the ballet at all, despite the fact that Ivan is on stage pretty much from start to finish, and when it does appear, it's often accompanied by the magic thirds. The princess's leitmotif of arpeggiated diatonic chords that you see pictured was constructed from the magic thirds. This may be from Stravinsky's pretty bleak opinion on Russian fairy tale heroes in the first place. He's quoted as having said in his book, Kashai the Immortal, the monster without a soul, represents evil incarnate. On the other hand, Russian legends in particular have as heroes characters that are simple, naive, sometimes frankly stupid, devoid of all malice, and it is they who are always victorious over characters that are clever, artful, complex, cruel, and powerful. At this point, you might be wondering about the Firebird. She's a supernatural character, sure, but she's not evil like Kashai. So how do we tell the difference? Although the Firebird motif is derived from the same ostinato as the magic thirds, they do not share the same light harmony. The Firebird is associated with whole tone music, while Kashai and his minions are associated with octatonic music. Stravinsky's purposeful compositional division makes the protagonist-antagonist division much clearer. Since both are supernatural, each one has to use a different type of chromatic music. Besides these leitmotifs, Stravinsky paints his score with countless rich textures which really illustrate the fairy tale. Brazen hand-stopped horns when Ivan captures the Firebird, scurrying demi-semi-quavers on the strings to show a bird's flapping wings, the rhythmic drive and syncopated pounding of a drum and double bass as monsters are compelled into riotous, uncontrollable dance, slow, mysterious chords on the harp and viola as a beautiful bird lulls the world to sleep. Stravinsky masterfully defines a world and its key players with distinct leitmotifs and light harmonies, and then he fills it with such vivid details that a story is truly breathed into life, all without a single word.